Hello and welcome to In Conclusion. I'm Kejan Haynes. Now, if you watched the show last week, you would have heard me lament the lack of human interest stories in the news. We spent last week running behind Jack Warner and the Prime Minister. But this week, we saw real humans in the news, not the politicians. SCA results came out this week, and there's always that one story that restores your faith in humanity and journalism. We can call this the story of the week.
Honestly, I feel great about the results I got. I passed for my second choice, which is Holy Cross College. And yeah, it's close to where I live.
Since the age of 5, Giselle has been attending the Strategic Learning and Special Education Institute in Twin City, where adults help children expand their circles of communication by meeting them at their developmental level and building on their strengths.
So, of course, congratulations to Jessel for passing for your school of choice and to Nisha John Mohammed for bringing us that story. But every year we cover the SCA results the exact same way. We chase the Prime Minister and the Education Minister as they congratulate the top 3 pupils. This year was no different.
For a second place, a second out of the 18,310 persons is Riyad Raja.
I worked very hard for this, so I hope you do the same.
However, the school which produced the first place student was Grant Memorial Presbyterian Primary School. They produced 15 out of the top 200.
Assigned to Nabarima Girls High School, first place student, Anusha Saha.
Indian-born Anusha, who moved to Trinidad when she was just 2 months old, thanked her parents, schoolmates and teachers for her success.
Unfortunately, in our coverage, sometimes we forget the bottom half of the students. TV6 uncovered this week that students who repeated the exam this year went in at a serious disadvantage from their other students. Their 4th standard continuous assessment scores weren't added, placing them at a serious disadvantage before they ever set foot into the examination room. According to documents obtained by TV6 from one primary school in the Port of Spain and environs area, the CAC scores of the repeaters are vastly different from their counterparts. Take a look at these other CAC scores. They're all in the 90s, but one stands out. It's in the 50s. There was another student with scores in the 50s, and that student was also a repeater. We made checks at other schools, and at least 2 others noticed a similar pattern. One other principal told us that when teachers went to enter the Standard 5 continuous assessment grades, the Standard 4 grades, which should have been in the system, were not. And just a follow-up after that story. After it aired, the Ministry of Education said that the issue was that the repeaters were entered into the system as having sat the exam for the first time, so their Standard 4 CAC scores were not entered. The ministry wants parents to come forward by Wednesday to get this rectified. Now, if you also saw the show last week, we spoke about gang warfare in Enterprise Chaguanas and just how dangerous it was for the residents living there and even the members of the media trying to get there because none of them could walk the streets safely. Well, several of the journalists did, and this story by CNews' Sherilyn Lewis gives an insight into just who might be behind the guns.
There has been a surge in assaults and shootings within the Crown Trace and Bagala Street enterprise areas. While there have been misconceptions that this ongoing spate of shootings is between a Muslim gang and the Rasta City gang, one imam says this is not so. In fact, the exchange of shootings has been between a particular Muslim faction and another group of gangsters from Bagalu Street. Imam Molan Moakil Abdullah of the Al Ahmad Masjid, speaking to CNews, said the head of the Muslim faction belonging to the Crown Trace area was actually expelled from his mosque.
I give him shahada, but then certain discipline that I find he did not have, that I expel him. You know, and maybe when we went to Bodram Street, they never work on his problem. So it just gets, worse.
So many times we spend talking about people who've lost their lives. Guess who's still alive? The president. This week he stood by his decision to keep the Integrity Commission intact and accused us, the public, of using rum shop logic.
Any decision of the Integrity Commission arrived at on the basis of the quorum as statutorily required is presumed legitimate unless a court of law determines otherwise.
And of course the public, wasn't too happy with that, and neither was Ramesh Lawrence Miraj.
Ramesh Lawrence Mirage says public bodies are required to make lawful decisions by conducting proper inquiries. He says for the president to ignore Justice Sebastian Ventur's comments about the process ignores the root of the public's concerns.
To say that because it was made by the majority of the members, it is a lawful decision is a very superficial answer and very cosmetic.
And if you were wondering, among the legitimate grounds for dismissal, it's misconduct, misbehavior in office, or failure to perform their duties. The president says that he had no evidence of any of that. But that's not stopping Jack Warner from taking issue with the president.
When he decided to appoint two persons to a commission that has been tainted, that is rum shop logic. The president has shown his hands, and he has shown that he's in the hands of the politicians.
And what would a week in review be without checking in on Jack Warner? This week, his newspaper brought out its tabloid best.
In some other news, the wife of Food Production Minister Devant Mirage is responding to pictures published in the Sunshine newspaper showing someone resembling her husband embracing and kissing a woman. Yesterday, the Sunshine newspaper, which is owned by Jack Warner, published photos on its front page with the headline, Playboy Devant. The article claims that all is not well in Mr. Mirage's marriage and he and his wife are separated.
So what do you think? Was it worth this story being picked up by the mainstream media, if you want to use that term? Tweet me and let me know. Because personally, there's some people who say once your libido doesn't affect the treasury, it doesn't bother me. Personally, I might agree with them. But maybe you have different ideas. Use the hashtag in conclusion. But, according to Jack Warner himself, he has issues with women of his own.
Warner says he has been betrayed by women who he has let into his personal and private business. He says that's the reason he has had legal trouble with the U.S. over decades of allegedly crooked FIFA dealings.
Took my FIFA notes from the office and came to Zurich, unknown to me, to sell me out. You take it to Haynes Ramkisoon, who for 4 years worked with me. Take it, of course, to Vimala Rambaran. Take it to Reniwa Chan. Take it, of course, to Kamala herself. Take it, of course, to Anna. So what's new?
And, of course, Jack Warner always reminds me that we need to bring the election back to the issues. That being said, it's time for this week's Wall of Promises. All right, so let's take a look at the Prime Minister's promises this week. She's talking of a plan for a silver, green and blue economy which would create more jobs. The green economy jobs will be in retail, distribution, construction for engineers, technicians and the many others in the establishment of renewable energy resource systems. Now, the blue economy is harnessing the country's water and marine resources, creating jobs in fishing and fish processing, tourism and beach resorts. And of course, the silver economy would cater for those over the age of 60 who wish to continue working. The Prime Minister is also promising more investment and transport in the community infrastructure. She's also promising rural development and construction. Now let's take a look at Dr. Rowley's promises this week. He's promising to create the Revenue Authority to improve the tax collection system. And here's what he said about that. He said the workers who are now in the Inland Revenue will have all kinds of opportunity available to them, either to work in the new authority or to work somewhere else or leave the service if they so choose. What he says is we're simply changing the administration of tax collection. See, that's also something that the former Prime Minister Patrick Manning said just before the end of his term. But after being run by a coalition, we're going to move on a little bit. After being run by a coalition for the last 5 years, Trinidad and Tobago now has a brand new coalition movement aiming to compete with the country's big two in the general election. It's called the Third Force Movement. And this coalition comprises independent candidates like Philip Alexander, parties like the NAR and the recently formed Alliance of Independence. And according to the coalition's chairman, Timothy Hamel-Smith, the aim of TFM is to transform the political landscape. It depends on what you think of the What do you think of the sign, though? Some people say it looks like the Hunger Games symbol. Some people say it looks like a Scout promise. And some people say it might just be the amount of votes that they'll actually receive. Let's take a look at the 8 o'clock news headline. Remember, it's just satire.
Cough drop zero, the best cough drops ever.
This will help me in a situation I had the other day, you know. Walking on the road, a man passing, smoking, coughing, and on top of that, suiting me and saying, sugars, sugars. I should have handed my cough drops you and say, no sugar.
This tasting real good, boy.
A moment on your lips, it won't go to your hips.
Cough drop zero. I could definitely kiss my wife for now. Cough drop zero, very refreshing.
Diana, the sweet genius.
Kuru, Africa. You are beautiful, Africa. The Emancipation Support Committee presents the beauty of the diaspora and the continent at an evening of African fashion under the trees at Hotel Normandy St. Anne's on July 5th from 4 p.m. Local designers include Sean Griffith PREZ, Christian Buku, The Cloth, along with fashion entrepreneurs from the continent. Jewelry by Madupe Onilu, Johan Mohammed, Ken Cooper, and Nzinga Salandi. Tickets $300. Special reserve $350. For tickets, contact the Emancipation Support Committee 628-5008 or Hotel Normandy box office.
Welcome back. Last Sunday's Express had a great article called "It's About the Economy Clowns," written by Raffique Shah. And to have that, we're going to discuss that even further. We have him on the line right now to discuss that article, the economy, and the elections. So, good evening, Mr. Shah. How are you doing?
Good evening. I'm fine.
Welcome to the show. So let's talk about your article last week. You said this election is all about the economy. Is it really going to be about that? And how?
Well, not really. I think that the economy is very important to be addressed by the politicians, by those of us who are covering the elections. Of course, crime will come above that in terms of its importance to the people of the country. However, ultimately, the economy and the state of the economy is going to dictate how the country moves, where we go. I mean, everything is around the economy, and it's not given sufficient coverage, not by the politicians and not by members of the media. I note that since I wrote that article, in fact, when I wrote it on Saturday last, on the night before the Prime Minister made her first foray into the economy, talking about the blue.
The blue and the different colors.
Yeah, silver, etc., etc. Well, it seemed to be a lot of buzzwords to me. And Dr. Rowley has made reference to the property tax and one or two other small things. But there's so much bacchanal that is they focus on that they miss out on the economy, and for the average member of the public, he or she does not see that as being so very important. But it is going to be.
But how could that be if, as somebody mentioned to me, the economy has to be important, because if you're worried about corruption, there has to be money for them to steal. So if you're not worried about the state of the economy and what kind of money we have in the treasury...
Yes, we need to know what revenue they get, and I referred to revenues last week over the 5-year period that the PP has been in power, as well as the expenditure, and it showed a deficit. I don't remember the actual numbers now, but they spent more than the revenue, which means that they had to borrow money. Also, that held true for the PNM in the previous 5 years, but their gap was slightly narrower, one, and two, their expenditure was much lower I think it was 270-something billion compared with 300 billion. There's the question of debt, there's borrowing, there's sectoral spending that we must look at, project costs and overruns. Those are things that we should be looking at, because ultimately down the road we have to pay what we borrow. With revenues, if they keep declining, they haven't declined that much, and the economy is not in crisis or anything, but there will be need for major intervention and some positive actions to be taken by whoever is elected to power come September 7th to deal with.
So whose job is it now to make sure that we get this election back on that track? Is it the politicians to start talking about it, or for the journalists themselves to maybe understand the economy better, to be able to put the questions to the politicians?
I think the journalists need to understand it and bring it into the discussion, because, you know, it's one thing for thus far in the campaign, and even before the campaign was officially launched, all I've heard is allegations of who is corrupt, who is not corrupt, who is, likely to appear in court for what. A lot of bacchanal. But we as journalists need to be aware of what's happening with the economy, and some of these fundamentals, raise these issues with the politicians when we interview them.
But isn't it just easier to just cover that? You're going to a political rally, it's 8 o'clock in the night, 10 o'clock in the night, you just need to bang something out. How do you, isn't it easier to just cover the bacchanal? Jack said she's going to jail, she said she's going to jail, and then if you need to get something out for tomorrow, it's not just easier?
Yes, of course, that sells, and we can't escape it. But at the same time, I think we have a responsibility, whether it's dealing at their public meetings or when we interview them separately. And, we don't depend on the politicians to paint a picture of the economy. They will paint the rosiest picture you can think about, or if you talk about promises, they'll promise the moon and the stars. We need to get down to documents like the Review of the Economy, which is produced every year, where you get authentic data on a whole range of items, expenditure, trade, the sectoral analyses, energy sector, agriculture, that is stuck at 0.5%. When they talk about what has been done to agriculture, and you see it's still 0.5% of GDP, nothing is happening.
I'm glad you raised that. What other resources would you recommend that journalists start going to get more information on the economy and how to cover the economy?
Well, besides the review of the economy and the main budget presentation, there's the Central Bank Annual Economic Report and a semi-annual economic bulletin, and you get a wealth of information in those documents, and they're online. The Ministry of Energy has probably the best online presence in terms of data, that produces a monthly and annual bulletin of the production of oil, gas, and all energy-related issues, and very good information can be had from that. More recently, we have the Trinidad and Tobago Extractive Industries annual report, unfortunately covering only 2011-2012 thus far, but that is a very detailed thing of what the oil companies produce in terms of overall production and how much money they contribute in taxes to government. Then there's the consolidated financial reports from the Ministry of on state enterprises, like, for example, Petrotrin. You can get into their consolidated report and you can see exactly how much debt they're in, or what their profit or loss may be, things like that. So there are documents available.
The information is there. Have we been failing the public by, as you say, only running to the politicians and letting them paint the picture of the economy for us?
Well, I think so, in large measure. Both the Express and the Guardian well, all the newspapers, I should think, the dailies anyway, have a weekly business presence, a daily and weekly business presence. You try to get as much as you can into it. I know certainly I do work for the Express Business Magazine, and we try our best, but we don't still fall short, far short of what we should be doing as journalists in terms of even offering opinions in the direction in which we think the economy could go. Because we mustn't believe that the politicians know it all, or even the economists know it all and will determine where this economy goes. And we as journalists ought to have positions that we could advance as well.
How do you position and how do you advance a position without being tainted as a PNM policy, as a UNC policy? It seems as though like journalists are walking this extremely thin line right now, and to advance an economic policy or position, is that not dangerous as well?
Well, as my late father would have said, chupul, you say what you have to say, write what you have to write. Once it's backed up by proper data and information that you garnered from these documents I mentioned, which are government documents, so they can't deny them. Once you do that, let people say what they will about tainting you politically. I mean, that is immaterial. We have a job to do, and there will always be those detractors who will try to position us as supportive of one party or another.
Can I get a little bacchanal? Mr. Warner would have attacked you for attacking him in the sunshine. Do you have any response to that, or is that all just?
Well, I mean, as par for the course, if I attack Mr. Warner, I expect him to respond. All I will say is that I don't think anybody has referred to me yet as a disgraced Raffique Shah, nor have I been branded a thief. Are you going to join the band of everyone else who's coming out and attacking Jack, or you kind of just staying away from Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I have had a position on Jack Warner for many years. My thing didn't even come up yesterday. I have been writing about Jack Warner since the 1990s, following that infamous encounter with USA in 1989. So, my thing is not new, and long before he entered politics, my view was that he ought never to have been in any position of authority in this country. But I'm just one person.
He still seems to have a lot of influence. He's dominating the headlines, in all sorts.
Yes, I think that is what he'll dominate, and I think he'll collect a few votes. But from my perspective, I think Jack Warner is a spent force politically.
Can I ask you about the central bank governor? He's also in a lot of bacchanals. We were talking the economy earlier. How does the central bank governor and this whole Clico fiasco measure up? Is the central bank governor now someone that we should be going to get a clear picture of the economy, or do you afraid that he might be tainted as well, as some people are saying?
Well, I thought it interesting that whereas economists like Trevor Farrell, a whole host of economists, Roger Hossain and so on, have been saying for quite some time now that the government, whether it be the incumbent or anybody coming to office, has to take certain, not necessarily drastic steps, but has to rein in expenditure on subsidies and transfers and so on, and stop all this freeness, or I shouldn't say stop, curtail the freeness that you have with giving everybody free money, this and that. The governor of the central bank was saying, ever since he became governor, that things are hunky-dory. I mean, not in those words, but giving that impression, until very recently, about 3 months ago, he first talked about the government coming into office in September will need to address the fuel subsidy and a number of other issues. So he has come rather belatedly to address what were pertinent issues with respect to the economy. But better late than never, I suppose.
The PNM has also talked about not cutting back. Their promises have been maybe better budgeting of the money. So Dr. Rowley says he's not necessarily going to get rid of the baby fund. He might not budget $100 million the way the Prime Minister has. What are your thoughts on that? Is that also a good economic policy, or is it just pandering to win an election?
Well, I think that they all have to pander to the voters to win an election, because people have been conditioned in the country to expect freeness. I mean, for how many decades now we have known that the fuel subsidy needed to be cut back. Not fully. I am saying that we should still have a certain amount of support or subsidy for fuels, but we cannot afford the level that we have been giving out for the last however many decades. Or with these social programs, mitigation programs, we need them, yes, but we need to have them properly structured, properly rationalized. I mean, I am really not in favor of the so-called baby grant. It gives a totally wrong impression that you are virtually paying people to make babies. I know it's not that, but that is how it comes across. I mean, you extend assistance to poor people, yes, but you don't keep them trapped in poverty all their lives and dependent on the state for everything. No, I'm against that.
Raffique Shah, thank you very much. Look forward to more columns from you in the lead up to this general election. Thanks very much for your time.
My pleasure.
This is In Conclusion. We're going to be right back to wrap.
Africa. You are beautiful, Africa. The Emancipation Support Committee presents the beauty of the diaspora and the continent at an evening of African fashion under the trees at Hotel Normandy St. Anne's on July 5th from 4 p.m. Local designers include Sean Griffith PREZ, Christian Buku, The Cloth, along with fashion entrepreneurs from the continent. Jewelry by Madupe Onilu, Johan Mohammed, Ken Cooper, and Nzinga Salandi. Tickets $300. Special reserve $350. For tickets, contact the Emancipation Support Committee 628-5008 or Hotel Normandy box office.
Anna butternut. Real thing, girl? I could taste the peanut in this girl. It's really good. Oh, it's so nice, Nick. I don't know what to say again. It's nice.